So we're going to start off with, some tips on personalizing your mailing content. We're going to segue into segmentation and targeting, and we're going to round it out with some deliverability tips that I think will be pretty useful. And let's start us off with personalizing mailing content. I'm sure that all of us are on the receiving end of email marketing, and hopefully, all of our email in our inboxes is from organizations that we signed up for and that we support. I get plenty of that. But unfortunately, I also get a lot of email from organizations I've never heard of or candidates that I would like, but I'm kind of irritated that they bought my email address. Or maybe companies that I bought one thing from 6 years ago, and I've been trying in vain to unsubscribe from ever since. Anyone else out there? There's a lot of email out there, and it can be really hard to even get your email opened, let alone get it clicked, let alone get action taken. So, how can you stand out? This is part of what this whole section is about. People get a lot of emails, especially during the end of year giving period, but there's also end of quarter giving for campaigns. A lot of campaigns are increasingly doing end of month giving pushes. And we also just came off of Giving Tuesday. So there's a real risk of donor burnout among, burning out our donors, right? So I think one way that we can really counteract this sense of burnout is to remind your supporters that they are part of something bigger than themselves, right? They're part of a larger movement. And if you have, key accomplishments or major campaigns, big events that your organization has been a part of, talk about that, right? If you can demonstrate real impact that your organization has had, talk about that, right? And best of all is if you can tell a compelling story about what you are able to do that invites your supporters to get involved and stay involved. And I get it. There might not be much to celebrate right now, right? Like, some communities are impacted really a lot more than other communities right now. Or maybe you do have some wins, but they feel pretty meager in comparison to all of the challenges that our communities are facing. So I get that. But talking about these challenges can motivate people to get off of the sidelines as well. Your supporters don't want to be lied to that, all hope is lost or that there's no point or that all it's going to take is to just like sign this petition. Neither extreme is correct, right? But I think as long as you're honest with supporters about like what they can contribute and how they can get involved, like that's really going to help. And since we're talking about getting your emails opened, it can be really hard to get your email opened among, all of the other emails out there. One of the best moves is to constantly test your subject lines to see which one performs the best before you send off your mailing to the rest of your list. So, for example, do you know which of these three subject lines is going to get the most opens and the most clicks, or the most donations, the most actions, whatever it is that you're trying to measure? Do you know which one is going to work the best? Are you sure? Right? I don't think that you can know until you've actually tested. And so on the target screen, you can go to the automatic subject line testing, which will appear when you have multiple subject lines to choose from. So you can set up this automatic subject line testing, check to see which was the best subject line after a predefined amount of time that you've said to wait. So in this example, I'm going to wait for 3 hours. And then after that, it's going to send out the winning subject line with the rest of my targeting, right? But with this limit removed, right? So this test email is going to go to 20,000 people. After 3 hours, whichever subject line, whichever one of these three had the most clicks, I'm going to send to the rest of my targeting with this limit removed. And then I'll know that, oh, I sent the best subject line. Of course, it's worth waiting long enough that your results are valid. If you don't wait a long enough time, you might not get meaningful results. I can't say there's no magic amount of time to wait. Back when I was on the client side, we would wait an hour, but sometimes we would see that after a few hours, we would have a different subject line, take the lead. So, sometimes it really depends. And I would test that to see, like, oh, which one is the best? How long do we actually need to wait, right? Testing is really, really helpful here. Some clients do a year in review that highlights all of the major accomplishments over the last year and does this in a way that's usually inviting supporters to share or donate. So, for example, Ultraviolet has been doing a year in review for many, many years. I know Dream.org does a year in review as well. And in the corporate world outside of ActionKit, of course, a lot of people are very familiar with the Spotify Wrapped emails. These are very, very popular. People often share their results on social media. So if there's a way that you can make it fun or interesting for the supporters who are receiving this email so that they want to share, they want to, hey, I'm part of this fight. This is, really big and I'm a part of it, right? That can really be very motivating. But every person has a reason that they chose to support you, right? So what are those specific issues that each person cares about? Do you know what your user base cares about as a whole? Do you know what users in specific care about? And another thing to keep in mind is that none of this is like a one-time choice. All of this is something that your supporters are choosing again and again to remain committed to your organization. So here's a handful of ideas for how you could personalize your mailings to remind supporters why they support you, right? So for the first one, this is when did the supporter first join? That's really easy to get. It's just one field. That's the user's created app field. And I'll show you how to get that in the next slide. For the issues or campaigns that the supporter has participated in, probably the easiest way to do this is with tags or user groups on your pages, and I'll show you that as well. And then for the first non-import action that the user took, I think this is really interesting. This is doable, but you will need some custom SQL in order to do that. So let's take a look at that first example. When did the supporter first join? This is going to be with the user.createdApp snippet. This is going to get when the user was added to the database. And if you were to use the date filter, you can put that date into a format that's good for email to be able to say, hey, Shannon, you've been a supporter since January 2025. Let's take another example. So let's say we have a petition page and we've added the tag issue pollinators to this petition page. So we know that anyone who takes action on this page is going to get this tag. And so we'll know everyone who cares about this specific issue. It's really best to keep tags reusable. So any page that's related to pollinators should also get this tag. I like to use tags that are reusable again and again and again. If I find myself tempted to make a tag that I'll only ever use once, it's probably not the most useful tag in the world. And I'd want to, rethink how I'm categorizing this page, these users, right? Tags should be reusable. And remember that every user who takes action on a page gets that tag. So now in my mailing, I can show specific content to users who have taken action on a page with this tag. The snippet that I'll use is if user and then the filter tagged, and then I have to specify which tag I want. So if user is tagged with the issue pollinators tag, then hey, we know you care about the bees, right? So you can customize the content specific to that user, right? And remind them, like you have this information about them, right? So you can be very specific with them. If your organization uses user groups in place of tags, you can use the in-group filter exactly the same way to show content for users who are part of that user group. Just keep in mind that user groups don't get applied retroactively in the same way that tags do. So in the previous example, you can go back and, tag your pages with, different tags, and we'll retroactively apply those tags to all people who have ever taken action on those pages. We don't do the same with user groups very deliberately. So they're very similar, but used slightly differently. Just keep that in mind. So there's lots of different ways for your supporters to be involved. And if you can remind people that they're part of something bigger than themselves, they're going to feel a greater sense of connection to your organization. For example, you can get a report and get data on things like how many petition signatures your organization got, maybe in this calendar year, and weave that number into a broader story about how you are able to make change with that, right? Using that petition, we turned that into, office visits and, big events and rallies and, how you were able to make change. And crucially, how the supporter played their part. Donors in specific want to know that their money was well spent and how was it spent? So if you can give an example of what you did with their money, that's really, really helpful. Or if you can explain how you'd use a donation they're about to make, again, that's really, really helpful. Donors will really connect with that, right? So in this example, I have, if let me try that again. If donations dot year to date, so in other words, if the user has made a donation so far this year, to date, you've given this much money, and that's helped us register. And then here I have, multiply the number of dollars by three and round to the nearest, to the nearest dollar. That's helped us register three times as many new voters. Otherwise, if you haven't given, can you make a generous donation of $25 to help us register 75 new voters, right? So you get the idea there. And if you want to learn more, I ran a full hour-long training on this subject using conditional content. We go into a lot of if and else and end if and how to use all of these filters together and what all of them mean. Check out this training. I will be sending the recording and all of the links to everyone who signed up. So you'll definitely get this. but check out the recording. It's full of practical, real-world examples that you can apply right away to your mailings. Next up, we're going to go into segmentation and targeting. So another way of thinking about this is who should get this mailing? If the last section was about how to include details about the user, this is about customizing what content the user is going to see. So think about segmentation as personalizing the mailings based on a user's interests, right? So what is the issue that the user cares about the most? Send them a mailing that's just about that issue and primarily send it to them, right? Don't send them a mailing about an issue that they're not interested about. This is most important for groups that work on a variety of different issues. But I think within each issue, right, there's like different segments within. So I think this advice can be really broadly applicable. Segmenting can be really helpful because if you target people that you know are interested in what you're sending them, you're going to get higher open rates and you're going to get higher click rates and higher action rates than if you sent it to a broader group of people that may or may not be interested in your specific topic. But if you know that someone's taken action on this specific issue in the past, they are much more likely to take action on it again. Now, you're probably already segmenting at least a little bit based on activity. For example, you might be targeting for 90-day openers or 90-day clickers or major donors. All of that's good. Please keep doing that. But I want to make the case to do even more segmentation. So you don't have to just segment based on activity or donor status. I think segmenting based on issues and interests or how a person gets involved can be really good ways to segment your mailings. For example, you could, be sure to always send mailings about a specific issue to users who care about that issue. Make sure that they see it, that they are taking action on that, or donating on that, or going to those events, right? Or you know that some users might like to sign petitions and that's all they're ever going to do. Others are going to come to every one of your events. Others still prefer to donate. Some will do all three. But can you, start there and then try to widen those circles so that, everyone, is going to get the action that they're going to take, but then can branch out a little bit. Now, if you're consistently using tags or user groups on your pages, segmenting can be really easy based on a user's interests. And if you're not consistently tagging your pages yet, or if you forgot to tag a really important page that was, critical to, one of your campaigns, no big deal. It's not too late. You can go back, you can tag your pages. We'll retroactively apply those tags to those action takers. But here, I have two screenshots from the mailing targeting screen where I can include anyone who has ever taken action on this particular tag. So any page with this tag or any page with this user group. Any user who has this user group, they're going to get this email. Or maybe you have a survey page where you've asked users, what is the single most important issue to you? Is it climate change? Is it jobs? Is it healthcare? On and on and on down the line. And you can target your mailing based on how a user answered that specific survey question. You can get really specific with this stuff. Here's another example. In this screenshot, I have a report set up to give me users who have taken, 3 or more actions on any page tagged with the tag issue climate. So any users who match the results of this report, I know that they care a lot about the climate crisis, enough to take at least 3 actions, right? And of course, you can target your mailings based on the results of your reports. Or here's a report that gives me users who have signed 3 or more petitions, any petition at all. And of course, every drop-down menu in the query builder can be toggled. So you can do this for, calendar year 2025 or all time, anything at all. You have a lot of different options here. You can also segment your mailings and personalize them at the same time with the merge query. So by adding the merge category to my query report, I can use this report to target my mailing and then include the results of this report in my mailing's personalization for this specific user. So as an easy example, this is going to show how many petitions this user has signed in calendar year 2025. Of course, I can get more complicated with that, add even more columns to this merge query, but I think this is enough for this particular screenshot. Don't want it to be too complex. So now we're going to round it out with deliverability. And this is really, will anyone see your email or does it go to spam? And we could easily spend a full hour or more talking about deliverability, and we have several times before. Here's a video of Randall and I talking deliverability tips for ActionKit. It's from a few years ago, but it's still relevant today, so check it out. It's well worth the time. And again, I'm going to send this and all of the other links and the recording later on once the recording finishes. And so you'll get that. You don't have to furiously scribble it down. And if you prefer reading to watching a video, the second link has our comprehensive deliverability guide with tons of great advice for any situation you could think of. And I highly recommend bookmarking it and keeping it handy. So since we don't have time for a full hour of deliverability advice, here is the quick version. If you're having deliverability trouble, it's probably for one or more of these 4 reasons. And the first 3 are really typically the same thing. Probably you sent more than usual. All of a sudden, you're sending way more email than you usually would, or you're sending to users who aren't engaged, or you got a lot more spam complaints than you usually do. And the fourth reason, which we can't do too much about, is some mailbox providers are just fussy. We can, try to work around them, but they're going to be fussy. So here's the thing, if you send more email than you usually do, it's probably because you're sending to users who haven't engaged with your email in a long time. That's going to result in a lot more spam complaints from users who don't remember signing up for your email. I wanted to share a screenshot from when I was troubleshooting a recent support ticket. The client noticed that they were now being blocked by a specific mailbox provider, and they asked us to intervene. And looking behind the scenes, it was obvious that they had sharply increased their sending volume very suddenly. That's what we're seeing right here. This chart shows the client's sending volume at one specific mailbox provider over a 90-day period. This purple line is how many recipients they were sending to. The pink line is how many emails bounced at that mailbox provider. Notice how the purple line is relatively steady for the first 60 days. We can see some weekends here where the volume goes down to zero. That's fine. I wouldn't worry about that. But notice while the sending volume is pretty much in this little range here, while the sending volume is steady, the pink line, those bounces, it's zero. Then we start to get into a little bit of trouble over here. And then on the far right side, we see that we send to way more people than usual. And of course, all of those emails ended up bouncing, right? Remember, the pink line is the number of emails that bounced. So this is basically, they tried to send way more than usual, and none of it got through. So this client ended up being blocked by the mailbox provider, and they needed our help in order to get unblocked. If you get blocked by a mailbox provider, Microsoft or Comcast or any of the others, right? 8 times out of 10, your sending graph looks a little something like this. And I think it's worth lingering on this graph to understand why this causes so many problems. So first, this red box here is one of the main ways that mailbox providers like Yahoo and Microsoft and Gmail, it's how they detect spam. Spammers tend to send as many emails as possible, get as many of them out the door as they can before it's noticed, and they get shut down. So a mailbox provider like Comcast or Microsoft, they're going to look at this and say, oh, this is textbook spam. They're not even going to look at the content of your mailing. They're looking at the volume of your mailing. They're looking at graphs like this. In this purple box here that I've added, this is the range of our typical sending volume, right? These are the people who are hopefully engaged or at least who are expecting to receive email from us. And so this is basically unchanged for like this 60-day period, as long as we have, history in this screenshot, right? But who are the users in this red box here? And we don't actually have any good answers for this, right? This is people who are disengaged, maybe, or it's people who haven't heard from you in a long time. They're going to be surprised to get email from you now. Or maybe these emails came from, an unscrupulous acquisition. You would never do that, but there are less scrupulous senders out there who might. Now, regardless, everyone in the red box, they're not expecting to get email from you. They haven't gotten email from you in like 6 months, or I'm sorry, in at least 60 days, right? Several months. Why should they start getting it now? And so all of these people are very likely to start clicking spam as a result. And when you take all of these factors together, the increase in sending volume, the increase in spam reports, probably a lot lower open rates, a lot lower click rates, all of this is how you get blocked by Microsoft or Comcast or really any of the mailbox providers. This is what you want to avoid. Now, you might think, especially as you're approaching end of year fundraising, you want to try to get as much as you can and reactivate as many users as you can. You might think like, oh, we haven't sent to these users in forever. Let's try to reactivate them. Or you might think, these supporters donated 2 years ago, and sure, they haven't been active since, but they were good donors back then. Try to avoid this if you can, because this is a recipe for higher spam clicks. Now, the graph that I showed a couple slides ago was really helpful, but that's just internal, just for ActionKit staff to look at. And you can't easily look at your own graph right now. But you might be wondering, could you put together your own graph so you can notice when there are those spikes. And while I was preparing for this training, I thought it would be really useful to create a report in ActionKit so you could have that graph, right? That's not available in ActionKit just yet, but I do want to make sure that it gets into a release coming soon. But you don't have to wait for that. I'm going to give you the code to create this report so that you can copy and paste it in when I send the recording around. So here we have a graph of the daily send counts by mailbox provider. In this screenshot, we have just Gmail here, but if we were to scroll down, we'd see all of the other mailbox providers as well. And we can see results over the last 14 days in this example. In the version I give you, you'll have 90 days of data to look at, and that's going to flatten out any minor dips like this one here with December 9th. But in this particular graph, there's nothing to worry about, right? The send counts are pretty even over this period. Don't be fooled by the y-axis here. We never get lower than 2,000, never get higher than 3,000. That's totally reasonable, right? I would be much more concerned about really big spikes, like, oh, suddenly we're sending to way more people than usual, or long troughs when you're not sending, or if you're sending very little. Something I see a lot of organizations make the mistake of, especially ones that are a lot more cyclical or really only work around the elections, that sort of thing, is going dormant for too long. And then, expecting that, oh, well, I still have my list. I'll just be able to say, hey, we're back. The problem with that is if you go too long without having your sending history, then Gmail and Microsoft and Yahoo and all the others, they will have forgotten about you and they will think, whoa, what's with all this sending volume out of nowhere? So that's something to be aware of. Especially if you're an organization that does more cyclical work, it's really important to keep your list active and make sure that you are regularly touching base with your supporters. Now, as we can see from this shark-shaped graph, there's trouble in the water here at Charter. We start off targeted to about 500 people a day. We never get above 1,000. And then suddenly, on December 3rd, we send to 3,000 people. And on December 4th, we send to 5,000 people. So what happened here? Was this a targeting mistake? Did you mistakenly import some names that you shouldn't have? Did you forget to exclude some list? Did you email the re-engagement list all of a sudden? Regardless of what happened, this is likely to cause problems for you at Charter. And while prevention is the best cure, the second best is to notice problems early and react accordingly. And on the subject of noticing problems early, I'd really recommend checking your daily open rates by mailbox provider periodically. This is a dashboard report that we provide built into ActionKit that lets you take a look at all of the various mailbox providers and all of the recent days and say, okay, for, November 30th, what was my open rate at Apple on this date, right? So all of this can be really helpful to see like when you start to get very low open rates at a given mailbox provider, what happened? Was there a change in your targeting? Did you have a new import that added a bunch of new users? Or was there some kind of change in who is receiving this email that Comcast or Charter or whoever didn't like. Now, this built-in dashboard can really help you identify when you have a problem with a specific provider, and it's going to highlight in red if there's a significant issue that you need to pay attention to. So here's an example of what that would look like. So here we can see our, open rates over time, right? And then, oh no, I was doing well at, Verizon. My open rates went from good to very bad, and they've stayed there for about a week without recovering. What's going on? Now, if this happens to you, you're getting, 0% opens, that's not normal, right? This probably means that you're blocked by that mailbox provider. All of your email is going to spam if it's even getting delivered at all. Little one-offs here, one-off bad days, probably aren't worth worrying too much about as long as you bounce back, but it can be worth understanding what happened here and why. Was this a targeting mistake? Or what was different about this day versus previous days, right? We do make some effort to try to ignore some of the noise, especially for uh, when you have a very small amount of sending volume, right? So this only went to 235 people. Sure, we got 0% opens, but was it really a problem? Unclear, right? So we'll notice that here on April 6th, we have pretty low volume across the board and a lot of low opens as well. Of course, this is all fake data, but it's important to pay attention to these things, right? Like if we have low opens across the board, well, it's probably not something that's specific to any one mailbox provider. Maybe, oh, I had a targeting mistake on April 6th. So I can ignore these results. But this kind of sustained, um, you know, dip in open rates, this is worth paying attention to. This is worth reaching out to Action Kit support about. We've also added a new chart on the mailing report screen that's going to be really useful. So previously, we showed open rates by mailbox provider on the mailing report screen, but we've made some really big improvements that is going to, one, make that report go way faster, which is great, and two, lets us add new stats. So soon, you'll be able to see new stats grouped by mailbox provider, including these recipients, including clicks, actions, and unsubscribes. So this is coming in the next version of ActionKit. Little sneak preview. And then when you're checking on mailing performance on the mailing report screen, you might also notice the bounce delay metrics warning here. If you see this, pay attention to it. It's pretty important. This means that there is something that needs your attention. And if we click this, this is going to take us to a new screen. This is going to show us a chart of how many people this mailing was sent to, grouped again by mailbox provider. And what's really interesting here is it's going to show us whether those emails were delivered, bounced, or delayed. So here at Gmail, almost everything was delivered. We had a few bounces, no problem, right? But at VMG, we're in trouble again, just like a few slides ago, right? We sent to about 75,000 people, but they didn't deliver any of them, 0.1%, 75,000 bounces. That's like a quarter of this mailing's recipients, right? So we have a big problem here. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can find out why. So under bounces, this is going to say that, basically 100% of the mail at each of these domains here it bounced. It wasn't delivered. And this amounts to a little over 25% of the total mailing. This is important, right? It's worth paying attention to. And so that's why we saw the little warning symbol a few slides ago. So what was the reason for all of this? Well, there's a lot to read through here, but the important part is right here. Sending IP temporarily suspended. Well, crap. And if we scroll down even more, the last bit on this page is the delays. So here, this is going to tell us some more information that will be really, really helpful. Here, this is saying that these messages were temporarily deferred or delayed first due to unexpected volume or user complaints. So temporarily deferred means that they are treating your mail as being possible spam. So they're going to delay it just in case. And maybe they'll deliver some of it later, maybe not. But this last part is really, really important. This unexpected volume or user complaints, that's typically because your sending volume increased drastically, or you got a lot more spam complaints than usual, or in most cases, it's the both. Now, in most cases that we see come into support, don't happen because of a single bad mailing. That does happen, but it's not common. What happens most often is you'll see some elevated delays first. And if you ignore that or don't notice it, and you continue sending more volume or you get more spam complaints, those delays turn into bounces. And if you ignore those bounces or don't see them, those eventually turn into spam blocks. So again, this is where the daily open rate by mailbox provider report that we saw several slides ago, that can really come into handy to help you identify when these problems are small before they turn into big problems, right? I said to look, if the problem resolves itself in a day, it's not a big deal. I wouldn't worry about that too much, but do pay attention. And it is worth checking, even if you have one really bad day, like, okay, what was different about my targeting that made that open rate so bad? What happened here? It's always worth looking. If I were still on the client side, I would be checking that every day. So just to give a super quick recap, personalize your content, remind supporters why they signed up, why they got involved with your organization and why they should stay involved, right? And try to tailor your content to your supporters' interests so you can boost engagement. And if you avoid large spikes in your sending volume, and for that matter, avoid going too long without, sending either, these things are all going to, feed into each other and build so that you can get better results overall. But you don't have to do all of it. If you're feeling overwhelmed or if you're thinking, but Shannon, I'm a super small team and, we don't have time to do all of these things. Try choosing one or two tactics, try them out as a pilot and see how it goes. But test regularly, try new things, and of course, you can always ask support if you need help. So thank you all so much. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I just want to remind everyone that you're going to get, the recording and all of the links.